Well, it's an honor to be here at the Sioux Falls Coalition on Aging. And I looked at your site, and being a group that loves to have long life learning, and having Sioux Falls to provide that opportunity for seniors and children with what all of you do, and the mission of your organization to be collaborative and interconnective, and to have a commitment to positive outcomes for the generations that you provide is outstanding, and every community should strive to do that. I had the privilege of attending in Boston Leading Age a couple weeks ago. And the mission of Leading Age is to expand the possibilities of aging. There were about 6,000 members, but there was about 9,000 people there. And it's not-for-profit agencies that are in the field of aging in all the common threads that when we talk about services to the aging. But there were two main themes, and one was to establish an aging-friendly community. There are actually communities out there that are not designing memory care units anymore, but taking portions of their community and saying, these 5 blocks are going to be the safe haven for those that are dealing with illnesses and dementia and Alzheimer's. That's an exciting thing. My belly just got excited. To do that in a community, is that not amazing or what? And then the other second theme was the haunting facts of America's workforce. And it's a staggering fact that from the CEOs to the least paid performer in human services, the workplace, the turnover, is within 2 short years. People come and go, and the average is 2 short years. In the provider sector, the turnover rate is low as 40, and sometimes well over 100. The average length of stay of an administrator in long-term care is 2 years. I was there 29. I finished up 39 years in healthcare. It was time for someone else to have a vision and me to have a new mission. And today, yeah, I have my followers there. So if you don't cause a riot, they're not going to put you on Facebook or anything like that unless you riot after you've heard me. It is the second theme that I would like to visit with you about today. Luke Kism, the chief executive of a multi-billion-dollar chemical company, hired a life coach, made millions of dollars, and this is what he thought about his life. He stated, "I just felt that no matter what I was doing, I was always getting pulled somewhere else. It seemed like I was always cheating someone. My company, my family, myself. I couldn't truly focus on anything." Is there anyone out there that feels that way? Anywhere? This is a common theme throughout our national workforce. It explains the sentiment that providers in human services feel every day. More broadly, just 30% of the employees in America feel engaged in their work. That leaves 70% of the employed people unplugged from their duties. That's a staggering statistic. The workforce describes their employment as this: depleting, demoralizing experience, and in some obvious ways, it is getting worse. That was a theme that I heard over and over in Boston. Demand for our time is increasingly exceeding our capacity, draining us of energy we need to bring our skill and talent fully to life. Increased competitiveness, leaner budgets, post-recessions, workforce just adds to the pressure. There was a project, the Energy Project, reported in the White Collar Salt Mine in New York Times. That was May 2014, yeah. I lived in the 1800s. This was the rise of the digital technology. is perhaps the biggest influence, exposing us to unprecedented flood of information, requests that we feel compelled to read and respond all hours of all days. And that was the other theme, the exhausting text messaging, Facebook, seeing what's out there, surfing. The expansion of regulations has tried to mend all that ails quality of care and quality of life in our increasingly data-driven society. A society where there shall be no negative outcomes. We can't have that in human services providers and professions. A society that is driven by constant gratification, instant information, and instant negative feedback. How many times have you received an email or wrote one and pushed enter and send it? With the disappearance of the person-to-person communication and the critical thinking reduced to assessments, protocols, checklists, graphs that measure success and failure, I have to ask you the question, have we reached a tipping point? Is the high turnover rate in our provider sector in human services really because the failure of our organization to improve employee engagement, to recognize employees, to have a stellar employee training program, to establish employee motivation programs and techniques, to measure employees' productivity so everybody is treated the same? We have all been to the latest retention and recruitment educational seminar. The themes, the strategic planning, the results have all been consistent. We know that employee turnover has some obvious costs. Recruitment, training, salaries. However, every time an employee leaves our organization, there's things that you cannot add up. There's a dollar amount that is elusive. And I like to call that slippage. When an employee is missing, the work isn't getting done. The ripple effect. The turnover has an impact on the peer group. And so while management has to struggle to find someone to replace them, the co-workers need to pick up the extra slack, and distracting them from their goals and the management goals, and we all find ourselves in that ripple effect. Then there's customer loss. When a knowledgeable employee leaves, taking the experience, the customer service ability with him or her, it can cost you customers. And lastly, the loss of credibility. Turnover has two costs. The service program can lose credibility, and the existing employees become demoralized and decide to move on. Now, I don't know how many of you have read the book by Malcolm Gladwell. It's called The Tipping Point. And he describes the tipping point as this. The tipping point is the moment of critical mass, the threshold, the boiling point. And I have to ask you again, have we reached that tipping point of evidence-based outcomes, unfunded mandate regulations, heaps of policy and procedures, colorful data supporting quality improvement graphs, and mounds of assessments and piles of double and triple documentation? Am I the only one that experienced that, or do we all experience that? Clearly, the way we are working isn't working. You may be consistently experiencing that you are not very excited to get to the office, or you don't feel very appreciated when you get there, or you find it difficult to get your to-do list done, and the important work seems to go undone. You don't believe that you're doing much to change the world, to affect someone's life, and by the time you get home, you're running on empty, and you still have emails and texts that you need to answer before you fall asleep. Increasingly, this experience is common, not just in middle management, not just in top executives, but entry-level employees. Entry-level employees get texts and emails. Can you come to work? Somebody called in sick. They too have this same experience. The social media and data-driven clicks are here to stay. And I'm kind of the old school. And so I know that I'm kind of out there in left field and maybe not even really politically correct anymore. But I think it's worth a discussion. It's worth a discussion to talk about what really is causing our turnover and our unsatisfactory and being unplugged. We know that the hands-on workforce remains limited, while the social media, IT technology, collecting and downloading data positions have grown substantially, thus shifting the limited time and money away from one-on-one strategic care planning to massive administrative data-driven outcomes that are analyzing to grade our success. So why are we continuing to push this unrelenting virus to drain our profession of employees that are motivated by doing hands-on work, and they find themselves lifted up and filled when they get to deal with individuals and families and elders and children? These employees are those in every level of responsibility. My greatest day was when I could walk out of my office and take a resident to the bathroom, not to look at a graph to see how the outcome came. Those of us gathered here today have a common thread that binds us together: the desire to reach ultimate goals for those we serve. It is to put the best person that I heard talk about this. He's a surgeon and an author. His name is Atul Gandhi. And this is what he says in his book: we need to find what our people really care about so we can walk with them to reach the ultimate goal. It is not a good death, but a good life, all the way to the end. Assisting with a good life is how human resource providers find the strength to continue to serve. So I was curious to understand what most influences engagement and productivity at work. So the Energy Project and the Harvard Business Review conducted a study to answer this question. What influences people's workplace in productivity is this: employees are vastly more satisfied and productive, it turns out, when 4 of their core needs are met. And this isn't going to be a surprise to any of you. Physical, through opportunities to regularly renew and recharge at work. Remember when work was really fun and you laughed a lot? Emotional, by feeling valued and appreciated for their contributions. Mental, when they have an opportunity to focus in an absorbed way on the most important tasks and define when and where they're going to get their work done. And finally, spiritual, by doing more of what they do best and enjoy most, and by feeling connected to a higher purpose of work. I want to tell you a story about Susie. And these stories that I'm going to tell you from now on are true. The names have been changed. Susie turned 60. She wanted to do something special for her birthday. She wanted to ride an elephant. I could not find an elephant in Brookings, South Dakota. But we found a camel. And that day of her 60th birthday, we started celebrating from the time she got up, and she was not a morning person. And we celebrated till the night she went to bed. But in the middle of that day, we took her out, and she rode a camel on her 60th birthday. There was not one assessment. There was not one protocol. There was no policy on residents riding an elephant or a camel in my book, and I did not write one. Every employee was out. Every resident was out. People in the community was there. And the child daycare center that shared space with the elders helped her celebrate her 60th birthday. I kissed the camel. It was much like kissing my redheaded husband's mustache. I'm a widow, and I forever think of him when I look at a camel. In that day, in that moment, when we got over the fear of, oh my God, she could fall off, the camel could spit at her, all of the things, the what ifs and whys and how comes, were put to rest. The employees on that day met physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual goal, and they left happy. I first met Dr. Thomas at an Eden Alternative, and yes, I started my career when I was 16, and that was a long time ago. But in 1987 was when I got licensed as an administrator. And Dr. Thomas, in the 90s, and I got to share the stage. We also got to share many training sessions. And over the years, I had the privilege of hearing him speak many times, and he got more and more popular, and now he's, internationally known. His message was simple. He established that the delivery system in a nursing home was in need to be enriched environment. And I agreed, because beginning my career at age 16 in the nursing home in Lemon as a nurse's aide, it is and continues to be, and it was then, that you go to nursing homes to die, you go to hospitals to get well and have babies. We must change that attitude, one mind at a time. And yes, there are bad nursing homes in the United States, but we cannot allow them to be the ones that take the media and the attention away from us who provide a change in the environment. Let me tell you about Johnny. You're not supposed to have favorites. Johnny was mine. Johnny is my all-time favorite. And I got his permission to use his name before he passed away. Johnny left South Dakota when he was 16 years old. He was the 11th one out of 17 children. He had learned to play the horn on his own. And he left South Dakota and his family, and he got as far as Las Vegas. And for the next 55 years, Johnny played the horn with the big bands. Who knows who the big bands are? Who's the big bands? Duke, Dorsey, Glenn Miller. Who's the Rat Pack? Sammy Davis Jr., Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra. Those were his drinking buddies. He remembers the history of when the white orchestra members went in the front door and Sammy Davis Jr. and the black orchestra members went through the kitchen. Johnny was a wealth of history and knowledge. And when he lost all of his teeth, and yeah, his little black book was full, and he didn't have any children that he admitted to, he always lived out of a suitcase. He never had a home address. He traveled the world for 55 years until the big bands died. And he decided to come home to South Dakota because his oldest sister was the only one left. He walks into the nursing home that I was administrator of one day, of a world traveler, and what do you suppose the system was in place? And what did we do to Johnny? We got Johnny up at 6 o'clock in the morning for breakfast. Do you suppose Johnny in 55 years ever had breakfast at 7 in the morning and was shaved and bathed by 10? Never. He hit and he kicked and he spit and he called us names, and then he'd go smoke a cigarette out by the oxygen tank, and then I'd go sit beside him. and Johnny and I decided to change a system. He promised me that he would walk with me and I would walk with him. And thus it was Johnny, a man who really knew how to live, that one of the beloved people in my care put the fire in my belly. It continues to burn today, and Johnny breathed life into the journey of alleviating loneliness in a vibrant environment. The Alive philosophy was the driving force behind the intergenerational continuum of care. It was created to bring life to every resident until their death. It was created to bring generations together. It was created to change the mindset of society and state and federal agencies and members of think tanks, elected and appointed officials, and to funding sources outside the state and the federal government. The Alive philosophy was created to change the system. So let me finish with one last story. Ida was 101. I walked into her room one day, and she was crying. And I asked Ida why she was crying. And she talked to me about her 80-year-old son. You know, for those of you who are mothers, you think it's over when they turn 18. It's never over until you take your last breath. Ida was 101. Her son, at 80 years old, she was crushed. He lost his driver's license. You know what that meant to her? He couldn't come and see her every day. She stopped eating. She started to cry a lot. She was devastated. So what did the system do? After so many hours and so many days in a decline, we had to do assessments and MDSs and protocols, and oh my goodness, we did so many things and so many documentations that we barely had time to have staff talk with her. We had to contact the doctor and make sure she wasn't suicidal and make sure that there was no medications that she needed. At 101, what did she need? She needed a staff member to have time to plan how her son was going to take the public bus to come and see her, how we were going to get her and take her to him if he couldn't come, how to arrange the phone calls so he could talk to her on those days when it was storming. Ida didn't need one piece of paper filled out. That's my story of how I want to start a discussion. Have we reached a tipping point? Did Ida really need a 39-page assessment? Have we reached a tipping point where regulations are important when they're focused on doing the right thing every day, making each contact a pleasant experience, individualizing care in every way, and being kind to one another? Are the regulations, policies, protocols, and graphs of success or failure creating the continued high employee turnover rate? Is the mounting paperwork shuffle destroying the human need to be physically renewed and recharged at work? Is the emotional toil, the demands of immediate responses, emails, texts, impersonal communication, devalued the feeling of worth and appreciation? Has the mental anxiety replaced the feeling of having an opportunity to focus on our most important tasks? And has our spiritual existence that brought joy and given a feeling of high purpose at work been destroyed? The Johnnies, the Idas, the Susies need us. If we remove the focus of caring for and caring about each person's daily physical, spiritual, emotional, and psychosocial needs, if we remove the need for human touch, a listening ear, and kind words, what happens? The answer to that question is before you. The results are this: less time for direct contact with individuals, high staff turnover rate, lack of a quality workforce, continued abuse and neglect, increased medications, and more administrative support staff than ever before to process paper rather than deliver the quality of care and quality of life that we all desire to do? Are the regulations tipping the scales to harm rather than support and serve? When is it the right time for society and families and staff and leaders and managers and clients to question the regulatory and federal and state agencies, the elected officials, the members of think tanks, and the drive to increase regulations? When is it time for us to create a message that unfunded mandates contribute to the skyrocketing costs of our health care and our services? Have we reached a tipping point? Has the obsession with protection and protocols and committee reviews and standard policy and procedures, outcome-based documentation rituals, turned to harmful outcomes? We gathered to hear must ask the question, have we reached a tipping point? Instead of asking the question of our staff, now how are we going to make this new regulation work? Or how are we going to make this new form work? How are we going to fit it into our workforce? How are we going to get it done? Maybe we should say, enough. Maybe we should ask those that create them, you tell us how we're going to do that. We must be that critical mass that has reached a threshold, and we will tip the scales back towards the movement to a good life all the way to the end.